You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hey friends, this is the Mike on the Right podcast. I am your host, Mike Neal. This is episode 22, September 29th, 2025, and we are hosting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier State. Please subscribe, 5-star ratings, share, anything you can do to help us continue to get this show out. It is greatly appreciated. Your listenership, your friendship, your support means the world to me. Thank you very much. Before we dive into today's episode, obviously things are happening kind of all around us. We've seen these political violence situations that have occurred very recently, and also an attack on faith, and things are unfolding right now up in the state of Michigan. And excuse me, my voice is a little congested and hoarse, so I apologize for that in advance. It's not your speakers, it's not my microphone, it is my voice. A situation unfolding where a Latter-day Saint church in central-ish Michigan, about an hour or so north of Detroit, has been attacked. Another attack on faith. A 40-year-old shooter who used his vehicle to ram into the building came out, guns a-blazing, shooting at folks. There are one dead, 9 or 10 injured. He set fire to the building. Police ended up shooting and killing him. Praying for all the victims, the families of the victims, first responders, and the congregation at large. This is incredibly horrific, and it's just a continuation of what we're seeing of this attack on faith. There's a lot of other attacks, a lot of other places, but we have seen this microcosm since really Minnesota with the Catholic school / church. And now who knows what the motives of this guy is at the time of this recording. Obviously, you're probably going to get a little more information than you'll get from me just because I'm recording this a day in advance. It's unfolding right now as we speak. But regardless, you don't just enter a church like that and start firing, I think, without some motive against faith in some way or fashion. And so, this kind of comes on the heels. I was just reading a story about a person named Savannah Craven. She's a conservative influencer on the internet. She was attacked a few months back in broad daylight. She was interviewing a lady on the street, Brianna Rivers, and in asking a question, the lady literally just cocked back and punched her multiple times in the face. And of course, in New York City, because it is one of the most lawless, worthless governments that I have ever unfortunately seen, and it's about to get even worse with this socialist they're about to put in. The Alvin Bragg, the same guy who was elected on not finding the truth, not finding evidence. If I'm elected, I will prosecute Donald Trump, regardless of the facts or the situations or what have you, right? And again, like it, don't like it, whatever. That was what he ran on. That's what he was elected on, not on being fair and tough, fair on justice, tough on crime. It was about, I'm going to prosecute this one person. Misses a deadline for this. The video, I've seen it. Absolutely just whacks her in the face. No provocation whatsoever. Right on the street. Not getting prosecuted. Prosecutors missed a key deadline. Case is over. She's, of course, going to get sued for the civil portion. She had to go to the hospital, what have you, so this whatever. But I'm telling you right now, the attack on faith in America is real. You better wake up. This is not even a partisan comment. This is reality, and we have to be on top of reality. Protect your kids, protect your families, watch out. I was just reading New York City and Los Angeles were deploying additional police assets to larger places of worship in response to what's happening up in Michigan. They should. There is an attack on faith in America, and it even happened. It just even in conversations from Charlie Kirk to this attack of Savannah in churches all across, or not just churches and folks who speak out about their faith. It's happening in America. Don't sleep on it, and don't let anyone tell you, Christians aren't prosecuted. You guys persecuted. You guys have it easy. I'm not saying that every situation is the worst it's ever been, but just because it's not the worst it's ever been doesn't mean it's not happening. And it's a slippery slope that we have to be careful of. Let's get into the meat of this episode so I don't go long like I always do. First, we're going to talk about why several European nations suddenly decided to recognize the non-existent state of Palestine and what that means for Israel and the Middle East. Then we're going to talk about the indictment of the former FBI Director James Comey, what that means for truth, what it means to you, what it means in the political sphere today. And then we're going to discuss the president sending federal troops to Portland. Why is he doing it? Is it legal? What's the response from those in Portland and in Oregon? We're going to talk about that here right now. Several European governments have newly recognized a Palestinian state. I'm going to tell you kind of the facts behind the whole thing. I'm going to give you my opinion. We're going to talk a little bit about prophecy and Israel, and we're going to talk about the UN's role in all of this. So what happened? About a month ago, the country of France announced that it was going to recognize Palestine for the first time in its history. And it was kind of this coordinated effort. Portugal kind of followed, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Andorra, all kind of falling in this position. And Prime Minister Starmer from the United Kingdom specifically said, hey, Benjamin Netanyahu, if you don't stop your war in Gaza, if you don't follow our rules of engagement, we are going to recognize the state of Palestine, which is something you don't want. And you know what Benjamin Netanyahu told him? Up yours. And so that's what we have. Again, you may feel one way or the other about the situation in Israel, but I will tell you this. Israel has been attacked for generations, and specifically the last 40, 50, 60 years, and Israel always gets the bad rap for what other people do to them. And then when they respond, it's like, oh, that's so heavy-handed. No. People, especially in Tel Aviv and other places, live daily under the threat of a mortar going through their living room, their ceiling, and then Hamas, who controls the Palestinian Authority and everything going on in Gaza, they say, oh, well, you know, they hide all their assets under schools and hospitals and things like that because they're cowards. And it's always Israel's fault. So now the Europeans, in their infinite wisdom, because they are certainly the authority on world peace, now tell us that, we have to recognize the Palestinian state, and this is Benjamin Netanyahu's fault, period. They argue that this keeps the two-state solution alive. It increases leverage on Israel over settlements and responds to humanitarian suffering in Gaza. And I'm going to tell you, I think you kind of already get, I always kind of get hot and bothered. I always try to give you the facts first before I give you my opinion. But this bothers me greatly because it is so increasingly obvious what's happening here. And I'm not going to rehash it. Let's get into why I think this move is wrong. This rewards dysfunction. It treats political symbolism as state building. Gaza remains dominated by Hamas, which is a terrorist organization that wants to push Israel and the Jewish people into the sea. That is their phrase. That is, they put it on T-shirts. I don't know if they do. It is a U.S. and worldwide recognized terrorist organization that seized the Strip in 2007 and wields de facto authority and armed capacity until very recently, when the Israelites obliterated their ability to respond. This short circuits negotiations. Recognition outside a negotiated framework removes incentives for the Palestinian leadership to reform security forces, unify government with the West Bank, accept Israel's legitimacy, which they won't do. And it ignores regional security reality. Israel faces a cross-border attack all the time. Hamas, Hezbollah, all different proxies for Iran and for other, what's going on in Yemen. It absolutely deteriorates what's happening with security guarantees and hostage releases, a verified end to rocket attacks, none of which are delivered by the Brits or the French or whoever else decided, you know what, Benjamin, we don't like what you're doing. We're going to recognize the enemy state that constantly attacks you. It makes zero sense in the flesh. It makes incredible spiritual sense, which we'll get to in a second. Has Palestine ever existed? No. Under the Ottoman Empire for centuries, the area was commonly called Palestine because it was a province and a region for larger empires. It has never been, in the history of the world, a sovereign, independent state. It was under the Ottoman Empire until World War I. And then, of course, the British mandate after World War I in 19 and 20, the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate for Palestine, and it was an administrative territory, not an independent country. And then, of course, in 1947, after the World War II, the United Nations put a proposal together that Arab leadership rejected. The surrounding Arab states invaded the new state of Israel, and there was still no independent state of Palestine that was established prior to or after or during these events. So the bottom line is the term Palestine has long been described as a geographical location. It's a region. It is not a sovereign state. So when people tell you that the Israelites stole what they had, no, it has never, ever been a country. So just hold on to that. That doesn't mean you can't show compassion for the innocent people in Gaza, but you have to understand that the terrorist network is trying to establish essentially a terrorist-run country, and that cannot happen. Period. And it's not just for the security of Israel. Anytime we allow terrorists to sink in and to grow, we get things like 9/11. And I know there's an entire generation, my son included, that don't know and won't know what it actually felt like to be in that time, because the global war on terror, at least in the United States, has largely been successful to keep things like that from occurring again. Where is the UN in all this? Well, you know that the United Nations and I, they don't actually have any idea who I am, but I certainly don't think they do a lot of good. There are some small humanitarian things that I think that they are good at, and that's about all they're good at, because when it comes to international relations, when it comes to war, when it comes to things like this, they absolutely wet the bed. And in 2024 alone, the United Nations General Assembly was on track to pass, and I'm not exactly sure how many passed, but I believe most of these did, 18 Israel-focused resolutions, some of them being condemning, some of them trying to adjust their behavior, versus 7 on the rest of the world combined. An imbalance that distorts reality. But we have got geopolitical forces in Russia and Iran and in North Korea and in Venezuela, and everybody focuses on Israel. And it is important, but understand the UN is in the bag for a Palestinian state. They are in the bag for what Hamas is wheeling and doing and pretending that the Palestinian Authority is a legitimate government. Their actions certainly speak louder than anything. It's a pattern of one-sided text. Recent emergency session texts have demanded punitive measures against Israel while minimizing Israel's right to self-defense, again signaling politics over peacemaking. True peacemaking by personal responsibility, by saying what it is. It is a continual terrorist attack against the Israelis. And there's an institutional effect here. This drumbeat sustains the illusion of progress. Endless condemnations, extended mandates, performance recognitions while the Palestinian Authority remains under the control of a corrupt or militant rule, and Israelis continuing to face rockets, kidnappings, etc. We cannot go back to the status quo. Real quickly, I'm running long in this segment. Remember, one of the things that I've been hearing a lot about is this kind of attack against Israel, saying that this nation state of Israel and the Jewish people are two totally separate different things when it comes to the biblical side. And while I can agree that there is a general difference, biblical prophecy includes the nation state of Israel, whether you like it or you don't. Nations gather against Israel in the Bible. It's not like just this group of people are going to go and extend the tent pegs as the Bible says that it will in the end times. Scripture foretells a time when nations turn against Israel. It's in Zechariah 12. It's in Ezekiel 38 and 39. There's an international pile-on that this is all prophecy in the Bible. Whether you believe it or not, it's what is in the Bible. There's an international pile-on where we're seeing what we're seeing today tracks with that prophetic arc. There's regathering and a restoration, the return of the land and the survival of Israel against overwhelming odds. Seem familiar right now? It seems like the whole world, except the greatest superpower, because even the Europeans are starting to melt on this. Everyone's coming against them. Again, it's in Ezekiel 36 and 37, talking about the dry bones, in Amos 9. And the Bible talks about the restoration of the covenant boundaries. God's promise of land to Abraham's descendants in Genesis speaks to Israel's enduring title deed under God. Prophetic messages suggest that security and expanded peace for Israel within the God-given boundaries in Isaiah and Jeremiah. And this is for Christians, specifically I'm speaking to you for just a moment, and I assume most of my folks believe in God, but if you don't, or you're struggling with that, I understand you can still listen, but I'm speaking specifically to Christians. We have to use discernment in the times and the seasons in which we're in. That doesn't mean that everything that the nation state of Israel does is right or wrong. But we know specifically from the Bible that the Israelites are God's chosen people, and they have assembled in a secular government, whether or not there are Jewish folks in Israel that follow everything that the faith has to offer or not. It is the vessel that God is going to use in those times. The Bible is specific about that. And in the end here, as I end this segment, understand that I am not preaching against those who are innocent in this fight. On both sides, there are Palestinians. There are people in the areas controlled by Hamas who are under the heel of dictators. We have to remember them. We have to help them. I'm still supportive of aid from all across the world going through the correct channels to make sure it actually gets to the people and is not stockpiled by Hamas. We continue to pray for peace. We continue to pray for the people. We continue to pray for the restoration of the region. Moving on. After my first one is always long. I always say I ought to do one, but what we're going to talk about next is another important piece to what's going on in America. You've probably heard about the name James Comey. He was a former FBI director that kind of transcended the part of the first portion of Trump's initial presidency. Just to kind of give you the history of Mr. Comey, he was the one that oversaw the FBI during Hillary Clinton's email investigation, and then, of course, the whole Russian dossier hoax that was later completely debunked and showed to be false. And then, of course, all the media organizations ignored it. And he's been accused by his critics for a long time about partisanship, about leaks, and lack of transparency. And everyone always says that President Trump is the one weaponizing agencies like this, but we saw the FBI weaponized against a presidential candidate, and this whole fake dossier that has 100% been debunked. This isn't even a partisan statement. Look at the facts. It was totally false. The people who were involved in it have pled that it was false. Don't let anybody let you think that this wasn't done prior to Donald Trump. Say what you will about Trump, and whether you like what he's doing or not, perfectly acceptable. But don't forget what happened before that. In 2019, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice found that Comey's retention, handling, and dissemination of memos related to the investigation on Russia being involved in President Trump's ascension to the presidency breached DOJ and FBI policies. However, the Inspector General did not find a prosecutable misconduct in those acts, and therefore, at that time, he was not charged. Fair enough. He was dismissed in May of 2017. Comey leaked memos of conversations with Trump claiming that they were aimed at prompting appointment of a special prosecutor. And some view that, I included, that was an improper disclosure. You had left office, you had been let go, and you decided to take all these documents and all these things and leak them, which again, later found out that the whole thing was a hoax. Over the years, Trump and his allies have repeatedly accused Comey of abuse of power, bias, being a part of the deep state, and demanded that he be brought to justice. But until now, no criminal case has succeeded or been opened, at least publicly, and now that has changed. A grand jury was convened, which, to understand the grand jury process very quickly, it is not like a trial jury, which there is a whole set of rules and vetoes of who can be on there and who can't from both sides. It is a random selection of a number of jurors, and they could be from any walk of life. They could be of any political persuasion. It's just very random. Just enough to see, hey, should these charges be brought? Is there enough evidence to say this should be discussed? Or is it so far out of bounds that it shouldn't be? And there were 3 that were brought, and only 2 made it through that process. One of them, false statements alleging that Comey lied in his 2020 U.S. Senate testimony, and then a count of obstruction of a congressional proceeding, alleging he impeded oversight connected to the disclosures that he let out and then was kind of caught in doing that. The indictment says that Comey testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on the 30th of September 2020, and that he said that he did not authorize anyone at the FBI to act as an anonymous source to the media. But prosecutors are alleging that statement is false, that he had instructed someone, and they're referred to in the grand jury material as person 3 to act as a confidential source to the media. Originally, prosecutors, again, brought 3 counts. I don't have which one was rejected, but one was rejected. And we have what we have. 14 of the 23 jurors, so well more than a majority, voted in favor of those 2 counts. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison. Let me tell you, and so here's going on across the internet right now, is that, this is Donald Trump going after his people who were detractors of his. No. I'm not saying he doesn't have a vengeful streak, but no, absolutely not, because the grand jury was not something that he could have tampered with. So don't sit here and tell me that Donald Trump is the one that is prosecuting James Comey. An independent grand jury found enough evidence to say that this should at least go through the process. Maybe he'll be found not guilty. He's innocent until proven guilty. And I'll stick with that all day long, as much as I don't like James Comey. He's innocent until proven guilty, and it should be kept as such. But do not start with me that this was an independent process. You know, we always say about no one is above the law. Even so, President Trump has been charged in a number of cases, a number of things, and this isn't the same as a lot of that. And I'll tell you why. Because again, not that there weren't grand jury pieces to Donald Trump's piece, but it was time and time. People were elected. Remember what I said about Alvin Bragg in the last segment, the DA in Manhattan? He was elected on, if you elect me, I will prosecute Donald Trump. Not, if you elect me, I will get to the bottom of everything. You want to talk about Donald Trump or not? I will not just serve justice. I will prosecute Donald Trump. That means that in order to keep a campaign promise, he had to do something. Otherwise, he was going to be seen as a liar to the people of Manhattan. So it wasn't about justice. It was about prosecuting that person. None of these independent jurors did that, were part of that. These people were randomly selected. The indictment is correct because this is a rule of law principle. We have to have truth in our institutions. Of course, the scope is very narrow. This isn't about politics. This was about, it was support. What Comey did supported the other side's politics, but what he did specifically was lie to Congress, impede an investigation. He's probably done a lot of other things that maybe he should be prosecuted for and at least looked at, but that's probably not going to happen. And we have to have public confidence in these institutions restored. And to do that, we must keep accountable those who perpetrate frauds against the people. So in closing, this indictment isn't vengeance, it's a test. A test whether powerful actors must answer for what they say and do as the people's representatives. The director of the FBI is still a representative of the American people to investigate. Don't accept immunity by title or office. The only one, there are pieces of immunity for those in office so that they can't be coerced into doing one thing or the other. But when you leak stuff like Comey did, there's consequences to that. Again, you have freedom of speech in this country. You do not have freedom of consequence, from consequence. Last item I have for you today. Protesters in Portland, Oregon. We've seen this since 2020 in the whole George Floyd thing. We saw, especially in Portland and Seattle on the West Coast, these takeovers of mobs of people, not just destroying things and buildings and what have you, but taking over police stations and offices and whole districts and creating as like this zone, like they seceded from the Union. That happened in Portland years ago. But that's not what's happening. So don't let there be correlation between what's happening in Portland. But you've probably heard that the president announced that he is going to be sending federal troops to Portland, Oregon. But why? There is a federal immigration building there where illegal immigrants are being held and transferred. There's those all across the nation. It's not just on the southern border. They're in other places in the United States. And you've probably seen, especially like members of city councils and Congresses and Congress and what have you, going to these facilities and trying to like inspect them and trying to like do this. But there's also been agitators and extremists who've been showing up at these places and protesting, which again, you have the right to protest as long as you do so peacefully. But they've been trying to get in the way of vehicles and stop them and disrupt. And there's been a clash between law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and people who have been agitating. But this one takes the cake because protesters have been setting fire outside this facility, and they brought a guillotine prop signaling what appears to me violent intent as to what's going on in that building. They're trying to say, look, you federal agents, you're going to pay for this. These are federal facilities. Another attack is from the city of Portland itself. The mayor of Portland has said, we're going to investigate this facility, which they don't have the right to do because it's a federal facility. But they're saying it's because of land use violations. They're going to try to cite them on zoning in order to stop the federal government from its mandates and from enforcing the law. Now, again, you may, and you would be right to you have the right to disagree with how President Trump is handling the illegal immigration crackdown in America. You can absolutely do that. There have been some things that I've been not happy. I have talked about them on this show, but largely illegal immigration is a problem in this country, and we have to curb it at the border, and we have to curb it at the sea, and we have to curb it wherever it occurs. And those that are not supposed to be here need to be sent away and let them try to apply through the legal system and get in line with those who are doing it the right way. You can absolutely 100% have that belief and at the same time not be for what's happening in Portland. Period. And I am 100%. So I believe that the president and his agencies have an onus to protect their buildings, their operations, and their officers from being attacked or having things set on fire or having guillotines put out in front of them or having them get in their way and try to block vehicles and what have you. So I believe the President of the United States absolutely has a right to reinforce what's happening on federal property. And I tell you what, the mayor, I forget his name now, the mayor of Portland is saying, you know what, instead of sending federal troops, maybe you should send some teachers, or maybe you should send, some more money. It's like, no, that is not his job. And they're not comparing like with like. It is your job, Mayor. It is your state's job. It is your school board's job to ensure that you have adequate teaching, teachers, adequate funding. And the federal government, again, I am for a Department of Education that essentially sets guardrails so that you can go from one state to another and at least have the same basics. Other than that, it should be a state and local issue when it comes to schools. Period. And so, no, you cannot compare your failure, Mayor, your failure, Governor, to what the president is doing, which is reinforcing these facilities and doing his job. I don't want to see agitation. I don't want to see, again, I still have some qualms about sending National Guard troops to cities and things like that, but these people are abdicating their responsibilities in several areas, and we have to be cautious with that. Friends, thank you so much for listening today. I hope you feel informed. I hope you feel refreshed, but I hope you feel the urgency of the hour. We're seeing this time and again in so many different places, and we have to be on top of it as Americans, as Christians, as conservative, whatever walk of life you are. We can agree, we can disagree, we can debate. We can't have what's happening in America continuing to happen today, and that's what this show will continue to be all about. Thank you so much for listening. I need your shares, your 5-star ratings. Tell your friends. Thank you so much. Have a great